So welcome everybody. I think first I need to thank the people who are here with us today. Fabio Peter for organizing this. Teresa Perez, who is online. Jeff Conant, but finally in person. Doug Hertzler. I should be saying the organizations they are from. Fabio is the Network for Social Justice and Human Rights, and he is at present a visiting scholar here at Harvard. Teresa Perez, also from Network for Social Justice and Human Rights. Jeff Conant, Friends of the Earth. Doug Hertzler, Action Aid. We are also welcoming Giovanna Garcia Soto, Grassroots International, and Hannah Weinrock, representing the Harvard Stop Groups. And the reason I start saying all their names and thanking them is that because I think all of us need to thank the presenters, the researchers and activists who have been really educating us on the environmental destruction and human suffering associated with the investments of the Harvard Management Company and other of these corporations. Their investment in farmland in Brazil has been causing a lot of environmental destruction and human suffering that we would not have known without their constant work of research and information, actually educating us about what's going on. For me, it's been a constant, a continuous education in the past several years as I read these reports and see it through some of these meetings that sometimes I'm lucky to be able to attend. And the facts and all the information that we have available thanks to their work makes it clear that for people like me, and certainly many of us who benefit from being at Harvard and others are available to us, I think it does create a very serious dilemma. If we look at what we teach our students at the college and as graduate students, we uphold the values of social justice, of struggle against inequalities. We are concerned about environmental questions. All these values in our curriculum, in the courses we teach, in how we present materials to students are in intolerable contradiction with the consequences of some of the investments of the Harvard Management Company. And I don't think the institution can go forward without facing this contradiction between the values it professes in its education and the actions, or some of the actions at least, of the Harvard Management Company and how the university invests its knowledge. So, and I really think that this event today and many of what you've been doing in the past several years is a process of continuous education that should bring the institution to eventually confront this contradiction and change its path or and also deal with the consequences of what it has already done in terms of damage to the environment and to the peoples, specifically in the Brazilian scenario, but certainly in other areas. So, and I think going forward, besides confronting these things, and I think confronting this contradiction necessarily needs to involve two things. One is recognizing what's being done. I think there is an incredible lack of transparency about the way the university invests in farmland and natural resources worldwide. And I think just like a transparency cannot go on, needs to be questioned, needs to change. Another way of dealing with this is talking about reparations. The fact that Harvard alleges to have sold or to be selling or maybe already sold the investment in farmland that they had in Brazil and Cerrado doesn't mean that you walk away making a new profit and then don't deal with the consequences of what you left behind. And I think a conversation about reparations is also necessary for the university.
Oh, okay.
To deal with that. And this is a place where dialogue is upheld as a basic value. And when the university does not respond, for example, to the very well done piece by Harvard students in the Crimson, published in April of 2023, and the spokesperson from the Harvard Memory Company did not even talk to the Senate journalists. And there was no response after the publication of that article. I think this is a denial of the idea of dialogue that the university upholds. So I think there is a very contradiction between what's going on and the values of the college and the educational mission that we all have. And I hope that this event and whatever else we can do to have this conversation, to make it happen, needs to be done. So just brief introductions, pay for your word of thank you to you for the work you've been doing to educate us and eventually to make the university confront its responsibilities in regard to what we were describing and telling. Fabio will lead us going forward.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for having us here and your invitation for us to launch this latest report from us called Land Grabbing and Ecocide, Album ETIAA in Harvard. Fuel the Destruction of the Brazilian Cerrado. It's already online, and thank you for the attendees online and in person. Those in person, we have some unities of the report here. You can get one, please feel free to do that. What we are presenting to you today is the result of this current research, which includes field visit interviews, but also it means a period of research that we've been doing that for around 10 years or more in a northeastern region of Brazil called Mato Piba. Tell you a little bit more about, and we will tell you a little bit about this region today. And what we are going to present to you today is the link between how financial capital works and the impacts on the ground impacts of an area in the northeast of Brazil. So we will go through different levels of analysis. Okay. So I will begin with how commodity prices are defined around the world. And the idea is to be able to link it with impacts on the ground, okay? Financial capital can allow us to entangle all the levels and enterprises involved in investment in agribusiness. Yeah? So it's a very updated graphic for commodity prices. Actually, I printed it 2 days before Russia invaded Ukraine. So we can see that the prices for commodities were going up before the war, and I will explain you why. And if you take a look to the graph, we see that from 2001 and 2, the prices for commodities in international markets, let's talk a little bit more about that. They start to go up. Before 2008 crisis, it achieves an apex here. Then it falls a lot, very sharply because of 2008 crisis. It starts to go up very briefly again and doesn't stop to fall until a moment after the 2021 in the middle of pandemic. How these prices are defined? Yeah? These are mainly financial prices defined in the future. Yeah. What does that mean? That means that investors are betting that these prices will go up or go down in the future, 3 years, 4 years ahead. So these prices, they will define also the present prices for commodities. Commodities are merchandise that are negotiated in financial markets. Future prices doesn't involve the negotiation of commodities physically itself. We are talking only about prices. We are talking only about a sort of financial investment. It works as if we were talking about stock options in the stock markets. Yeah? The deal is to buy cheap and sell it more expensive, as if it was a stock option in the stock market. So after 2002, many investors started to bet in future markets, in the prices for commodities. And when it starts to climb, to go up, new investors jump in, and it drives the prices high. Again, it reinforces the process. And these prices are very high. Yeah, it's a historical peak here, and another one right there 2 years ago. Yeah? It has to do with inflation nowadays, actually. Yeah? But only for you to understand it, how does these prices influence the movement of concrete production, yeah? Of soil production on the ground? For example, in Brazil, in the region, we are going to show you. Yeah? All the players involved, all the enterprises involved, financial actors, trading companies such as Bunge, yeah? The main one we are going to talk about today, producers there as enterprises from Harvard, from TIA, SLC, from Brazil, yeah? And smaller producers too. How does that work? You take and you issue debts over these high prices, you advance the money to the present, and you produce, for example, soybean, the main commodity we are going to be talking with you today. So you have very high debts for everyone involved, and you have to produce to pay it in the future. Okay, but these prices are so high and the debts are so high, it has to do with how financial capital works, that it's impossible for you to produce it in the same area available. Yeah, it's not only about increasing productivity. You need to increase in area. You need always to open new frontier and to improve area for you to, in the future, for you to be able to try, yeah, to pay the debts. Yeah, when the prices go down, what happens? It's impossible for you to keep doing that. Yeah, but you need to do that. So you need to try to deal with the debts, also opening new areas in worse conditions, but you have to open new areas. And where are those new areas? Yeah, where are those new spaces? That's the point here. That's how we link financial capital, expansion, constant expansion of production of commodities. And in the case here, let's talk about soybean. And the destruction of a forest of a region. We are talking about the Cerrado, a savanna-like region in Brazil. So if we take a look at the movement of soybean production in Brazil, so we have here since the 70s until 2020, we will see soybean taking great part of Brazilian territory. And we are going to talk about this region. I think online people can't see this. It's called Mato Piba region, yeah, where we have this savanna-like frontier in Brazil. And this is a target for expansion of soybean production in Brazil. In the Workers' Party government of the 21st century, deforestation of the rainforest, the Amazon forest was reduced in Brazil. Yeah. So the Cerrado region was the main target for the creation of new farms, the deforestation of the Cerrado. That's why we can see deforestation in the Cerrado for the last 20 years in this so-called Mato Piba region, including the states of Maranhão, Tocantins, Piauí, and Bahia in the northeast of Brazil. So it's impressive, actually. And when we are talking about that and the business about creating new farms out of the deforestation of the Cerrado, we are talking about a process that includes, I will keep it here for a while, that includes violent and illegal land grabbing, deforestation, and the laundry of this new farm to be included in the market as a private property. Yeah? So that's the point here. That's how we can link and entangle financial capital, trading companies, and producers of soy being in this region. Yeah? And a very important business after, mainly after 2008, is farmland as a financial asset. So farmland starts to be used also as a stock option. The deal is to buy cheap farmland, wait for the price to go up and sell it. Yeah? So between 2006 and 2016, for example, it was the main asset for Brazil, in Brazil, as an investment, as a financial investment. So better than dollar, interest rates, bonds from the government, stock markets, and gold. So even if, so the first graph again, even if we have the prices of commodities falling down, and the price of farmland should be related with that, that's not what happened. The prices of farmland kept increasing and keeps increasing because enterprises start to invest only in farmland as if it was a stock option. We call it a financial asset. Yeah? So many enterprises were created after 2008 to invest in soybean and in farmland. For example, TIA created a joint venture with Cosan, the biggest Brazilian, maybe world sugarcane and sugar production, and created Radar, and they started. Radar only invests in farmland as a financial asset. Yeah? And Harvard was invested, and maybe is still invested in many enterprises in this region in Brazil. We are going to show you, let me check only my time here. We are going to show you about Insolo that Harvard already sold in this region in the Mato Piba, specifically in South Piauí, for you to have an idea, a concrete idea of what we are talking about. And other enterprises they were creating, special enterprises only to invest in farmland. And because of the surge, the demand for farmland, the prices of farmland were not falling down. And it kept going up, and enterprises were not even producing commodities there in many conditions. Yeah. So before going ahead, I'd like only to specify to clarify that what is happening in this area. In Matopiba, only go back to this. Yeah. So how do we link old process of land grabbing and what's going on? Our research is showing us that this process, yeah, of illegal land grabbing, deforestation, and the laundry of farmland is going on right now. We are in the middle of it, but we saw it happening in the past, and we know how it works. Yeah. So only for me to be able to link everything. How does it work? Yeah. It's very cheap for you to deforest in this region and wait for the price of this farmland to go up. So the local land grabber, it can be a big entrepreneur, will make false land titles in the notary offices and will deforest this area and try to sell it for another partner, for another player. As everybody is demanding new land, yes, since financial capital, trading companies, big soil producers, it's for them that this land grabber will sell this land. Yeah? That's the mechanism here. That's the structure. That's how it works. So it involves necessarily illegal land grabbing, deforestation. So you create a farm from out of nowhere and you sell it. And then the ones who are buying this farm, you say, we have nothing to do with that. Yeah? But we will show you that, for example, in South Piauí and West Bahia, these enterprises, they are buying the farm from the same guy. For example, in South Piauí, they are buying all the farms from the same land grabber, a huge one in the region. So everybody knows to where to go and how to buy it. So I will ask Teresa to jump in, and so she will continue and show us how this process is going on, and our research is showing how it is happening right now. We are in the middle of such a process there. So this past process is repeated, and we are keeping track of it, and we would like to show you how we present it in the report we are launching here. So wait one moment, please. Yeah. Teresa, you have the room.
Olá, boa tarde. Eu vou falar em português e agradeço a Giovana, que vai traduzir. Eu vou apresentar casos concretos que a gente registrou nesse último relatório. O foco da nossa pesquisa foi o sul do Piauí, né, que está no bioma cerrado, uma área de expansão do agronegócio brasileiro. E a gente trabalha ali assessorando as comunidades tradicionais que reivindicam a titulação coletiva dos seus territórios. E o reconhecimento e a proteção dessas comunidades sempre esbarra na expansão da soja sobre os territórios reivindicados. Giovana, eu vou parando para você.
Sim, por favor. Sim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to speak in Portuguese, and thank you to Giovana that is going to do the interpretation for me. Today, I'm going to talk about the cases that have been registered as part of, focusing in Piauí, as a part of, located in the biome of the Cerrado, and the expansion of the agro-business that have been impacted the traditional communities that live in this area, that have been protecting their territory and their livelihoods. And I think that at the end you say something about soy. Que foi o que você falou no final da soja? Você pode repetir o final?
O final é que a gente trabalha assessorando, né, as comunidades que estão reivindicando as titulações coletivas, E essa titulação sempre esbarra na expansão da soja sobre os territórios reivindicados pelas comunidades.
Yeah, and the work that they're doing, they are working with the communities, like giving them the legal tools so they can continue protecting and working for the collective land that have been impacted by the expansion of the soil.
Bom, então nessa primeira imagem estão registrados vários desmatamentos que foram identificados por monitoramento de satélite e cruzado com denúncias feitas pelas comunidades de 2020 até o início de 2023, e mostra que grandes desmatamentos estão em curso ali no sul do Piauí, e são praticados por essas grandes empresas que o Fábio comentou, né, como a Insolo, que era de Harvard e foi vendida para um empresário brasileiro, a Radar e a SLC Agrícola, entre outras.
So in these images, you can see the pattern of the deforestation. This is like a satellite image. And all of this and is overlap with the collective territory of the communities. And these images have been taken from the 2020 to the 23, the deforestation images. And these have been lands that have been grabbed by different companies that Fabio was, enterprises that Fabio was sharing, such as Radar and others, in the south of Piauí.
E de quem que essas empresas compram, né? Compraram e continuam comprando essas terras. Muitas dessas fazendas, elas foram compradas por essas grandes empresas de um grande grileiro da região ali do Maranhão e sul do Piauí, e por causa das evidências de grilagem, uma ação na justiça bloqueou 124 mil hectares de terras ligadas a esse grileiro, e que depois, por uma ação judicial movida por um fazendeiro, elas foram desbloqueadas, e desde então os desmatamentos aumentaram muito ali.
Quanto é a quantidade de hectares?
124 mil.
120.
Para eu repetir?
Yeah, no, tá. All of this, why this big enterprises or company are buying and continue buying this land, and they have been buying this, it's illegal land grabs, as Fabio was saying, are connected with the same land grabber that is selling this land. And there was a legal action that was made to block the continued buying of this land, and they were able to block 124,000 hectares. But what happened was that these land grabbers, they do another legal action to be able again to be open that land, and what are happening is that the deforestation continue increasing.
E a gente se pergunta o que vai acontecer com essas terras, né, que estão sendo desmatadas. E o padrão da grilagem ali na região indica que depois de griladas, desmatadas, elas vão ser vendidas, e que tem grande probabilidade de que as empresas compradoras sejam essas grandes empresas que estão no entorno pela necessidade constante de expandir os seus negócios, como o Fábio mostrou, né?
So we ask ourselves what will happen with this land that have been illegally bought, and the deforestation that happened, and the pattern indicate that after all of this happened, this land will be sold to the same big enterprises that Fabio was showing or explained to us. And this big enterprises, what they're going to do is that they're going to continue expanding the agribusiness in the area.
Bom, um dos casos que a gente mostrou no relatório é o da fazenda Cajubar. Essa é uma área que foi bloqueada na justiça em razão da grilagem. Depois ela foi desbloqueada e desde então ela teve mais de 3.000 hectares de terra de 21 até início de 23 que foram desmatados e mesmo depois de muitas denúncias, ela continua sendo desmatada até hoje.
More than 3,000.
So this is one of the cases that are part of the report, that is the Cajubar farm. And this part was one of the areas that was blocked after the legal action to protect it. But again, went to the judiciary and they unblocked the area. And then you can see the increase of the deforestation, like so far, more than 3,000 hectares in that area.
Bom, essa área está sendo disputada por 2 grileiros e os moradores da região denunciam, inclusive, a presença de milícias armadas que guardam as fazendas e que intimidam e ameaçam as vidas deles.
This land is in a conflict, in a dispute between 2 land grabbers. And the communities have been indicating and sharing that some organized or armed militia is threatened to their lives because they are trying to protect their collective land.
Então, além da Cajubar, tem muitas outras fazendas que estão nessa mesma situação, né, que foram griladas, que estão sendo desmatadas para serem vendidas. E o que a gente vê é que essas empresas, ao comprarem essas terras, elas efetivam a grilagem, né? Então, isso aconteceu no passado e isso continua acontecendo atualmente. Ou seja, essas terras griladas sendo desmatadas provavelmente vão ser vendidas e os potenciais compradores são as empresas que estão no entorno.
So this is just one example. There's other farms that are in the same situation where they have been land grabbed, the forest, and now are ready to be sold. And again, what this process is doing is legitimizing the land grabbing that is happening, because it's like a pattern. So and when all of this happened, these enterprises or these big companies are ready to buy and continue again expanding. That is the pattern that is happening there.
O Estado também tem um papel importante aí, não só sendo omisso quanto à fiscalização dos desmatamentos, mas também regularizando essas grilagens.
The state is also playing like an important role, not just allowing this deforestation to happen. Another thing is also they are doing regulations that allow the land grabs to happen.
Essa imagem ela é bem representativa da paisagem da região, que é formada por chapadas e por baixões, né, as terras baixas, e tanto as chapadas como os baixões, eles eram usados pelas comunidades tradicionais. Geralmente, as moradias e os plantios, as roças, ficam nas áreas baixas, e as áreas altas de chapada, elas eram usadas para coleta, para caça, para solta do gado, para acesso a remédios tradicionais.
This image show a little bit how the area, the ecosystem look. And this have like high plateaus and low lands. And usually the traditional communities, they live in the low plateaus where they also farm, they produce their food for their families. And then in the high areas, they collect other food or products that they need. And they also hunt, and they have access to the natural medicines that they use for their communities.
Com a expansão rapidinho, Fábio, com a expansão do agronegócio sobre essas áreas, as monoculturas elas foram implantadas sobretudo nas chapadas e as comunidades foram sendo confinadas nos baixões.
The high. With the expansion of the agribusiness, the monoculture was more concentrated in the high plateaus, and then the communities, the traditional communities, they are confined in the low part.
Então, essas comunidades elas não têm mais a possibilidade de viver como elas viviam. Os espaços para o plantio se tornaram muito restritos. Elas não têm mais acesso às áreas de coleta, de solta do gado, de caça, né? E passam a ter que se vender como força de trabalho para as fazendas da região, quase sempre em condições muito precárias.
So what happened to the communities is that now they don't have the possibility to continue living in their traditional ways to sustain their livelihoods that they depend for this, the nature. So their areas to farm are less and less, so they can produce the food that they need, and they are not allowed to continue collecting or hunting in the areas that was part of their traditional way of living.
E de alguns anos para cá, as áreas baixas, onde estão as moradias, os plantios, também passaram a ser alvo de grileiros que negociam essas áreas para a implantação de reserva legal das fazendas.
And in the recent years, also the lowlands have been like a target for more land grabbing in the communities.
To serve as legal reserve of the farms. Yeah.
Pode mudar, por favor. Essa imagem é de uma queimada ali no sul do Piauí.
This is the image of one of the fires that happened in Piauí.
E essa imagem é de um correntão que é utilizado para a derrubada do cerrado. É uma forma relativamente barata de abrir fazenda, em que são 2 tratores, um em cada ponta desse correntão. Eles vão passando e devastando tudo o que tem pela frente.
This photo shows the tool that they use to destroy nature. It's like a chain. They use 2 tractors, one in each side, and they go and a devastation. It's very cheap and very easy to do and quick.
Aí uma área desmatada, já derrubada.
This is like an area that already was deforested after they do that.
It's inside a TIAA farm in South Piauí, actually, some years ago.
E aí uma área com soja plantada ao lado de uma área com cerrado ainda em pé.
And then you can see the image, like this side is the soy plantation and this other side is the natural forest of the area.
Bom, essa imagem e as 2 próximas, elas mostram o avanço do desmatamento no sul do Piauí e do Maranhão de 2000 a 2008 e 2016.
This shows the advancement of the deforestation in Maranhão and Piauí
Yes,
from the 2008 to the 2012.
it's 2000, 2008,
2000.
2016.
Oh. Okay.
Yes, people ask me to do it again. It's
Ah.
impressive, actually. So 2000, 2008, 2016.
E os impactos ambientais e sociais gerados por esse processo, eles são gravíssimos, né? Como a derrubada do cerrado nativo, os problemas hídricos. Nessa foto a gente vê o leito de um rio completamente seco. Além disso, o envenenamento das comunidades, né, das pessoas dos territórios por agrotóxicos, o confinamento das comunidades e a impossibilidade delas reproduzirem as suas vidas como faziam antes, e ainda convivendo com a presença de milícias armadas.
So the impacts of the environmental and social impacts are very severe. When the destruction of the Cerrado, they also bring like hydric problems. You can see this picture of a river that have been this dry, and also the poisons of the communities and people with agrotoxics that they use for their plantation, the confinement of the community that are impacting their livelihoods. And on top of that, now the militias attacking them for just being there.
Então, assim, as empresas envolvidas, elas podem até vender, passar para frente essas fazendas, mas os graves impactos causados por esse processo do qual elas fazem parte, eles permanecem e muitas vezes são irreversíveis.
These corporations, they can continue the work, they can sell their land, but the impacts will stay. And a lot of them are irreversible, that will not change.
Essa foto e as próximas, elas são de comunidades ali do sul do Piauí.
These photos of our communities in the south of Piauí.
Bom, e por fim, o nosso próximo relatório, a gente está se debruçando em uma pesquisa no oeste da Bahia, que é ao lado dessa região do Piauí, onde o desmatamento e a grilagem também estão muito presentes, e onde a gente vê que as empresas, né, que estão no Piauí, muitas delas também estão no oeste da Bahia.
And the next research or report will be about the west
Bahia.
of Bahia, where the deforestation and land grabbing is happening, and we can see that are the same corporations also impacting that area.
E ali no oeste da Bahia, no município de Cotegipe, a gente visitou uma fazenda que foi bloqueada pela justiça por evidências de grilagem. Mesmo assim, ela continua sendo desmatada, que é a Fazenda Caracol, que ela era ou é de propriedade de Harvard. A gente não encontrou nenhuma informação pública falando sobre a venda dela.
Is bringing another example of a municipality in Bahia, Cotegipe, where there is like land grabbing happened in an area that was blockaded legally, and they continue doing deforestation. And it looks like Radar is the one that is controlling that area. That was Harvard. Sorry, I understand.
Harvard, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for those. Harvard is there is not sign of selling the land, but Harvard looks like it's the yeah.
Bom, eu final... Desculpa,
no information if it is still the owner.
No. Teresa.
Então, eu finalizo aqui a minha apresentação. Esse relatório que a gente está lançando hoje, ele pode ser baixado no download, né, no site das entidades que estão aqui lançando ele. E agradeço.
I'm just gonna end my presentation here. You can download the report with all of the entities here have access to that. And I just want to say thank you. And thank you. I'm not a professional interpreter. Thank you for the solidarity of the support.
Obrigado, Teresa. Thank you. So we'll move forward, and we will have now Jeff Conant from Friends of the Earth, who is supporting also the report, the launch of the report, and Friends of the Earth was also author of the report. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Fabio. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Conant. I direct the International Forests Program with Friends of the Earth, US. Friends of the Earth, US is the US branch of Friends of the Earth International, which is, we call it the world's largest federation of grassroots environmental groups with organizations in 75 countries. And my mandate, my role is really to run campaigns to halt the destruction of tropical forests and the human rights abuses that accompany that. And I want to just begin with gratitude for all of you for being here and for having a platform to talk about these issues, and for Fabio and Teresa and the amazing team at the Ecocide for all of the really brilliant work that they do. And maybe take a minute on the genesis of the report. I hope you'll all take a copy. It's not often we actually get to hand a physical thing to a physical person, so take advantage of that. And just to say that a few years ago at Friends of the Earth in my program, I'd been following the work of Fabio and Teresa and Ecocide for some years, and they approached us to see if we could develop a partnership to basically publish their research in the US and use it in advocacy. And it's been just a wonderful partnership where they do the hard work on the ground of doing the research and supporting the grassroots communities and helping to build, and support grassroots resistance, which is really the key to everything in this work. And then we help by identifying the powers in the US, TIA and Harvard being among them, and Bungie, who I'll talk about, and then developing basically campaigns to target these interests and try to change the way they do business. And I think part of what is unique and interesting in what the Ecocide does and what's in this report is showing how is exposing how a key driver of deforestation, which is really the issue that I work on, is financial speculation. Deforestation is a massive problem globally. It's a massive cause of the climate crisis. It's actually the second leading driver of climate emissions after fossil fuels. Last year, the world lost an area of tropical forest roughly the size of Belgium. And so there's a lot of focus, increasing focus, and rightly so, on deforestation as a climate issue. But deforestation itself is not the problem, it's a symptom of the problem, right? And the problem itself is corporate power. And that's where this work comes in, and the work of the Ecocide in really exposing the role of financial capital. And we'll stay on this slide for just a minute. I guess, well, another sure. Yeah. Another way of looking at the deforestation issue, if tropical deforestation were a country, it would rank third in CO2 emissions after the US and China. So it's just a massive problem climate-wise. So what we do at Friends of the Earth is we are building an international campaign, or part of an international campaign, to support the grassroots effort in the Cerrado by identifying the links to multinational and US actors, highlighting their links to land grabbing and deforestation, and mounting public campaigns to hold them accountable. As we're getting from Fabio and Teresa, the multinational corporate entities here play multiple different roles. TIA and Harvard use financial vehicles to purchase the land directly, as we've heard, and they then often lease the land to agribusiness companies who extract value from the land in the form of calories. We call it mining for calories, in this case, soybeans. And when we talk about agribusiness, we often might think about food and the role of agribusiness in quote unquote feeding the world. The agribusiness industry has done a tremendous job of positioning themselves as as feeding the world. But in fact, the biggest product of industrial agriculture is not food, it's the externalities and the byproducts that their industrial model brings: poisoned air, poisoned water, poisoned soil, barren land, and displaced people. And we try to expose that. And that's why we chose in this report to use the term ecocide, to make clear that the primary harvest, if you will, of industrial agribusiness is the deliberate destruction of the natural environment in the interest of profit. And let's see, part of the context here, and you heard a little bit about the threats against land defenders in the Cerrado. Right now, there's an epidemic of violence against environmental human rights defenders worldwide. There's a great organization called Global Witness that puts out a report every year documenting, tragically, the names of the people who are losing their lives on the front lines of fighting for environmental human rights. And the report just came out a few weeks ago this year, showing that every other day, one environmental human rights defender is murdered for simply trying to hold on to their land and steward the environment. And that's just the statistic for murders. We're talking about that as the tip of the iceberg, with suppression of dissent and criminalization and harassment, intimidation of all sorts behind this. So the story that we're hearing from Fabio and Teresa is, as I think we all know, sadly, it's a global story, and it's happening everywhere. But that's sort of the context of violence that we're in, and agriculture accounts for 1/3, or industrial agriculture accounts for 1/3 of global greenhouse emissions. The top emitters of greenhouse gases in the agriculture sector are the companies that we call them the ABCDs of deforestation. Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus are the A, B, C, and D. So along with the other two, Bunge is one of the world's largest agribusiness traders and one of the largest soy processors in Brazil. Bunge is a US listed company based in St. Louis. And there's simply no way through the climate emergency as long as companies like Bunge continue to grow, which, as you've seen, is exactly what they're doing. Bunge's carbon footprint comes from industrial livestock, transport infrastructure, and land conversion, which is the polite word for deforestation with massive chains of the sort that we saw there. And as we show in the report, just this chart shows, there are many agribusiness companies, at work in the region, but in this particular region of South Piauí, Bunge holds a monopoly on the soy trade, which is what you see here, controlling almost 75% of or no, that's not percent, but controlling a massive volume of the soy trade. And this is through ownership of silos and crushing plants and transport infrastructure. So they really dominate the infrastructure in the region, which means anybody that is selling soy in this region is most likely selling it to Bunge. And Bunge is also providing financial capital to all of these smaller traders in order to be able to grow the business. And so that's why in this report we've targeted Bunge to change. And part of what we do is, of course, a company like Bunge, one of the world's largest multinationals, is not going to fix these problems simply because we flag them, or they're not going to do anything out of goodwill. So among the campaign tactics that we use is to identify where the company itself gets its financing, and find leverage among the financiers to force the company to change based on reputational risk and financial risk. And now the fact that many financiers, investors, and banks have adopted their own voluntary sustainability commitments, generally linked to meeting the new goal of net zero emissions by 2050, which itself is riddled with problems. But what's interesting is that we do have, the world's largest banks and the world's largest investors have committed voluntarily to meeting these climate commitments. So part of what we do is we show them how they're failing to meet those commitments and just point out the hypocrisy of that. And one of the things that we uncovered in this research directly bears on this, which is that at the UN Climate COP in Glasgow in 2021, financial institutions came together under the umbrella of the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, or GFANZ as it's called, which is a voluntary global initiative to transition the global economy to net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So in principle, the financial firms that are members of GFANZ have committed to ramping down their financing of climate negative projects and companies. But we found that 7 of the top 10 shareholders in Bunge are members of GFANZ, and we did the research to find that all 7 of them, and this is in the investment side here, you see on the right side, it's, oh, right, the title is wrong. Whoops, I put this together fairly quickly. The left side is actually the investors, and the right side is the creditors, meaning the banks. So on the left, so pardon that, I got the titles wrong there, but we're talking about investment firms like Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Fidelity, Bank of New York, and Capital Group, the largest investment funds in the world. Many of them have these rhetorical commitments to reducing their greenhouse gas exposure, and yet all of 7 of the investors there have increased their financing of Bunge to the tune of $1.8 billion since they made their commitment at Glasgow. And similarly, the banks have, we expose in the report that a lot of the banks that are part of the GFANZ network have also increased their lending to Bunge rather than addressed the problem. And so that's all in the report. And then one of the, just to share some of the ways that we do advocacy on this, there's a site that we've produced at Friends of the Earth called Deforestation Free Funds, where you can look up your own 401k retirement fund and find out what companies it is invested in that are driving deforestation. So you will find TIAA and BlackRock and Vanguard and Fidelity, and you can do your own research, because this kind of stuff until recently has been very difficult to find. Your investment manager, if you were lucky enough to have a pension or 401k, won't give you this information, and you can get it, but it's very difficult. So we provide it on Deforestation Free Funds, and from there you can take action. And then there's a network called the Forest and Finance Coalition that we're a part of, which also has a tremendous amount of data on the role of global financial firms in driving the deforestation problem. And there's a network that we're part of called Stop the Money Pipeline, which is largely focused on forcing the financial transition off of fossil fuels, but we're in there also working on deforestation. And just a couple of weeks ago in New York, during New York Climate Week, there was a massive march against fossil fuels that was largely put together by the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition. So essentially part of what we're trying to do is show how Wall Street is financing climate destruction, and all of the ways in which we can use the kind of data that we're learning here and take action to change the tide. And that's what I have to share, and I think I'm passing it on to.
So thank you, Jeff, very much. Now we have Doug Hetzler from ActionAid. Please, Doug.
Thanks, Fabio, and thanks, Professor Toulouse, for hosting us here today. And we've like Jeff and Friends of the Earth, we've been partnering with Hedge Social for some years as part of the same coalition, and with Jeff on the Stop Land Grabs coalition. My name is Doug Hertzler, and I'm policy analyst focusing on land rights and the human right to food at ActionAid USA. The Global ActionAid Federation recently launched a campaign targeting the banks and asset managers who finance climate destruction. So it's actually part of the same campaign because our federation has joined it with Stop Money Pipeline as well. The ActionAid Federation has its secretariat in Johannesburg, South Africa. ActionAid USA is just a small country organization within the federation. And the campaign is, if you want to look it up, it's #FundOurFuture. ActionAid USA is focusing on TIAA. And the Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association. Let me see if I can advance my slides here, which is one of the companies you've heard mentioned repeatedly here in this report. TIAA is a Fortune 500 company with $1.2 trillion under management. It is closely intertwined with Harvard University, and they share some of the same investment strategies as Fabio has pointed out. TIAA has 12,000 institutional clients, including many of the colleges and universities and hospitals in the United States, and also lots of small not-for-profit organizations. I myself and probably some other people in this room have retirement savings with TIAA. Yeah, it's yeah. Mr. Jalum does as well. So that's why we're here. Harvard University, let's see. Harvard University is one of the top clients of TIAA with almost $4 billion of faculty, staff, and retiree savings invested. And so students, you can note that those are your tuition dollars that are finding their way to TIAA. Harvard Medical School faculty member and former Dean of Medical Education, Edward Hundert, serves on TIAA's Board of Trustees, receiving $350,000 in compensation last year for participating in board meetings. Harvard law professor Howell Jackson serves on the board of TIAA's subsidiary CREF. TIAA and Harvard are both global leaders in promoting the idea that large companies should buy up farm and timberland on a massive scale. So if you go and look at deforestation-free funds, as Jeff suggested, you'll find out the companies they're invested in, like Bunge, which are deforested. But in addition to that, they're the leaders in promoting the idea of directly owning timberland and farmland. That's beyond even what you'd find if you looked at the mutual funds. TIAA and Harvard, as Fabio mentioned, both used a businessman named Colin Butterfield to run shell companies that were grabbing land in Brazil. The main shell company mentioned here is Radar, or Radar, if you want to say it in English. TIAA has the largest portfolio of land of any company globally, with 3 million acres in 10 countries. They own over 1 million acres in the Brazilian Cerrado, and that's the whole of the Cerrado, just Mato Piba, which they value at $3 billion, and over 750,000 acres in the United States, which they value at $7 billion. TIAA's strategy is to buy up farmland, to speculate on the land price increases, as Fabio explained, and they typically buy farmland from the largest farming companies, injecting capital into their operations so they can expand the amount of land they farm. That's, again, what you see in the report. And this method rewards those who engaged in tactics such as land grabbing and deforestation. I'm repeating what was said earlier, but for emphasis. As the report points out, TIAA tried to evade Brazilian limits on foreign farmland acquisition by using shell companies, and they repeatedly acquired land from several of Brazil's most notorious land grabbers. TIAA dresses up its land grabbing strategy in sustainability reports, complete with meaningless and easy to achieve indicators and anecdotes that don't really reflect the overall impact of their investments. And one example of the greenwashing you can find is their participation in now discredited carbon credit schemes, such as the Vera carbon registry. See the Guardian, other reporting on that, those carbon registries. I have personally visited TIA's acquired land in Illinois, California, Arkansas, and Pennsylvania. And I'm waiting for Fabio to invite me and Teresa to invite me to Brazil. I think I'm already invited, but I need to go. I've been to Brazil, but not directly to TIA. From the ground, it's easy to see that they are engaging in standard large-scale agribusiness and timber industry practices. This includes massive greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, depletion of groundwater resources, heavy use of chemical pesticides, and farming right up against the drainage ditches without cover crops, which promotes soil pollution and water pollution and soil erosion. TIA is driving higher levels of mechanization and market concentration, which eliminate local jobs and drains resources from local communities toward Wall Street, both in the Northeast Cerrado and everywhere they're doing this. Brazil is not the only place where TIA has engaged in profiteering from land stolen by violence. Please consider a webinar that I'm assisting with on October 26th. It's being held by the organization TIA Divest and community members from Elaine, Arkansas, which is the site of one of the largest race massacres in the United States in 1990. TIA has bought up 50,000 acres of land around Elaine, an area which would be larger than the District of Columbia, the U.S. Capital District. Land accumulated by white families who participated in the massacre and its cover-up and took the land from local Black landowners and sharecroppers following the massacre. For years, community members and descendants have been calling for both land and monetary reparations, but they only learned just a couple months ago that TIA is behind the shell companies that own the land. And so, if you can, please use the QR code there to register or take note of the short URL there. And also, consider signing up for the newsletter. TIA Divest is an all-volunteer group that produces very good regular newsletter, TIAA-divest.org. With these folks here, I've worked for a number of years, including Hannah at Stop Harvard Land Grabs with stoplandgrabs.org. It's a rather underfunded coalition of groups. We're working on reconstructing our website to look differently, and so it looks a bit jumbled right now, but please do sign up for the mailing list there as well. And also connect with Stop Harvard Land Grabs. Consider how you might reach out to the Harvard administrators and faculty members. I know you've been doing it about the endowment, many of you. Consider doing it about TIA as well. It's a big chunk of money that Harvard is heavily connected to. And all your faculty and staff members, I don't know what retirement options Harvard offers. Maybe they have multiple, but it's for sure that many of them have TIA retirement savings. And they can use that, as a voice to change things, as I've been trying to do. And if you look at the demands coming out from the different organizations, the different impacted communities, we need to tell them that TIA needs to return this land to community control and to make reparations for the harms done. All right, thank you. That's all I have. I hope we have a couple other people to hear from.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah.
I'd like to invite Giovanna Soto to talk about grassroots a little bit.
Yeah, I can share a little bit. Hola, my name is Giovanna. It's an honor to be here sharing this space with all the speakers and all of you that took your time to be part of this collective formation space where we are learning together. So Grassroots International accompanies social movements in the Global South, specifically indigenous, Afro-descendants, and peasants, and other traditional communities that are in the struggle defending land, seeds, territory, water, food, and also defending the Mother Earth. So, and we are supporting those that are trying to dismantle the system that is oppressing them, but are also building the alternatives, the new alternatives that are connected to human rights, are centered in ecological justice and in the collective liberation of people. So we do all of that through grant makings and also social action and advocacy. As you can see, we are part of this campaign, and our core strategies are connected to strengthening the social movements as the agents of transformation and the ones that are also building the new. We know that if we support the movements, we need also to defend the defenders, because those confronting the system are being attacked, criminalized. We can see that in the communities that are trying to protect their collective land rights in the Cerrado and everywhere that we work. So that's part of our work, and also the work that they do in the sustainable livelihoods, how they build those alternatives that keep their traditional ways of living. Our praxis is solidarity philanthropy. That means that we have a partnership model that is centered in solidarity and long-term political commitment. We know that the struggles are long-term, so we need to walk with the social movements and support the long-term political agenda so we can see the change that we all want, and we can stop some of these horrible things happening around the world. So we have been working with Rede Social. Well, we started working in Brazil at the end of the 90s, and Rede Social was one of our first partners in Brazil that have guide our analysis and our strategies in Brazil, because all the work that they do on the ground. So we have been supporting their core work. They provide and they work supporting the collective human rights of social movements. Some of our partners in Brazil, Rede Social, accompany their cases of criminalization, assassination, and all the evictions and everything connected for those defending territory. We learned through Rede Social and all our partners that are located in the Cerrado region about all of this expansion of the monocultures, what was happening with the Mato Piba, the last agro-business frontier in Brazil, all the increase of mega projects. So through the research, we also support the research. We start putting attention to our Brazil strategy, and including the Cerrado as a very important part of the work that we do, because the Cerrado is one of the important biomes that have less protection in Brazil if you compare with the Amazon that is also being destroyed, but they have less protection. So they destroy, and you can see how quick they can destroy and impact the communities that depends on that. So as a part of that, we deepen our strategy there. We have been supporting all our partners there, such the landless workers movement, the movement of people affected by dams, groups like ASEMA working with Quebraderas de Coco de Vavasu and other traditional communities, Rede Social. More recently, we also work with CPT and Moquibon, that is Quilombola organization, also trying to defend their territory against all of these threats that they are facing. And also Asteas dos Povos Tradicionais. All of these groups are part of the Defending the Cerrado campaign, that is the local campaign in Brazil. And at the same time, we are part of the Stop Land Grabs campaign that have the United States, also the international campaign. We support the campaign, the actions of the campaign, and we are part of the campaign because we are located in the north, so we are responsible of pushing US policies and the institution and the global capital that is impacting people in Brazil. That's part of our social action and advocacy work. So we have been supporting all of these people doing different work, defending the Cerrado in different fronts, and the affected communities for this scheme of pension funds that is the heart of the campaign, but also this important research, these reports that would guide us to continue building and strengthening the campaign, the collective campaign that we are pushing, so we can stop these people. So the mere existence of a collaboration between the social movements in the global south, because the protagonists here, we support the part of the campaign that is doing the work on the ground, organizing communities so they can defend their collective land rights and their livelihoods, and at the same time connected to the campaign. So that collaboration between the South, the movements, and all the allies in this table, and all of you here in the North, is very important and is a threat to the success of the global capital system that, as we see, dressed as a socially responsible and environmentally responsible entity. So we must continue amplifying the voices of the community impacted. And this work is vital not just for the communities there, it's also vital for us in the North and for the defense of the Mother Earth herself. So in my mind, it's impossible to comprehend how the money that we set aside to be safe in life, we have been working hard, how this money is used to displace, to dispossess, to attack, to assassinate, to criminalize, and to violate the human rights of the communities that depend on the Cerrado for their livelihoods. So this is and they also have the hard work to protect nature and the well-being of humanity. That's the work that they're doing, protecting their collective rights. So I think that is unacceptable, and we have to be responsible, and we have to hold this institution accountable. And the professor was sharing, I think that we have to push them to repair the hurt that they have been causing to the communities. So that's me.
Thank you, Giovanni, very much. For us to finish, I'd like to invite Hannah Reinhold to talk about Stop Harvard Land Grabs campaign. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Weinronk. I'm part of the Stop Harvard Land Grabs campaign. And the Stop Harvard Land Grabs campaign emerged a few years ago as a response to all of this frontline organizing and research that has been happening. Because as Harvard is one of the main actors responsible, there needs to be a response from within the Harvard community and a way to visibilize Harvard's role and responsibility as they hide behind all of these shell companies in the US and abroad. And so the Stop Harvard Land Grabs campaign is a group of students and alumni organizing in solidarity with frontline communities. What you can see here in the center image is from a protest that we organized a couple of years ago, and it's hard to read, but on the black signs, they say return land to communities, no new land investments, reparations, and transparency. And those are the main demands that we have for Harvard and for the Harvard Management Company. We do communication, putting out news and sharing about what's happening with Harvard's role in these land grabs around the world. We support research, we do base building, so bringing in people from across the Harvard campus, taking action, and we've also been exploring a legal strategy. And we've been working very closely in partnership with the Network for Social Justice and Human Rights in Brazil, and with all of the partners in the Stop Land Grabs campaign in the US, and have also been connecting with frontline communities in other places where Harvard owns land. So this includes in Argentina, where they own timber plantations, and in California, where they have been buying up land and planting vineyards in extremely drought-stricken areas, basically buying up water rights. And most recently, one really exciting piece of news is that farmers in California have been organizing against Harvard trying to gain permits to withdraw more water from a critically overdrafted basin in the Cuyama Valley. And students and alumni and staff spoke and gave testimony alongside farmers to the Santa Barbara County Board of Commission. In the spring, the commission denied Harvard their permits. They've been trying to get these permits for 7 years. Harvard appealed this decision, and there was a hearing yesterday afternoon where more farmers, more residents, and more Harvard students and alumni spoke out against it, and the permit was denied for the final time. Yeah, so it's been really powerful to see what's possible when we have people from Harvard speaking out, visibilizing Harvard's role in this, and calling for accountability from the university. And we're excited to continue to deepen that work. It's amazing to have Fabio here with us on campus this fall, and Sydney and all of you who are here in this room. So what's up here, just very briefly, is there's a petition which has been live with those core demands. And if you can sign that, you can also find it on our website. If you just Google Stop Harvard Land Grabs, you'll find it. We send out regular updates to share what's happening with the campaign. And we also have an interest form down here, or which you can fill out to share if you want to be more involved actively in organizing, or you can email us at stopharvardlandgrabs@gmail.com, and would love to be in conversation about how to continue to build this effort here on the Harvard campus and with the wider network of alumni and people who are part of this institution.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah. So this is the end of the presentations, and we have time and space now for questions and answers. I think we could keep it here for the ones that are in person. I don't know, Josh, if there are questions from online, from Zoom. I don't know if it's possible. If the chat is active, I don't know.
When the chat's not active, if folks wanted to ask a question, they could, they would just raise their hand up too. And I can alert you to this question.
So if someone from Zoom wants to make a question, you can raise your hand.
And I will be translating for the interpretation for Teresa. You have questions for her. I am listening on time.
Thank you, Giovanna. So please. Who else? I think maybe you can make a round of 3 questions, 4 questions, and we answer. We have around 50 minutes or something for that. Rona?
Just to know, if you ask a question, just try to speak maybe 10–15% louder than you would otherwise, just because the mics are located on the table.
Anyone else? Yeah, she will be the first. What's her name?
Oh, Andrew Shallett.
Okay. So, Rona, if you want to start, then Andrew, and then.
Just a basic question. Just wondering about what was the original legal status of the land? Who owned it? How? Yes,
No. Is it possible for people online to hear the question, Josh?
If you just speak a little bit louder.
which way though?
The mics are in.
Okay,
Over the
I'm
table.
just wondering about the original legal status of the land that we were just hearing about.
Okay, please, Andrew.
If a company like Bungie wanted to buy land that wasn't land grabbed and certify that the land wasn't land grabbed, would there be any way for them to do that?
Who else? The questions are good, so feel free to answer. Or any doubts, no problem.
Maybe that's a good start and you could just,
Oh, we do have one on Zoom.
Okay.
Fabio?
Hello. Martin, my friend, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good to see you there.
It's a pleasure to meet. I would like to beg your help because my English, I think it's a little bit broken. So I would like to beg you to translate my. Is it
Okay,
possible?
so are you going to do that in Portuguese or in German?
Português.
Tá bom, então vai lá que eu tenho que traduzir você depois, por favor.
Eu achei muito interessante que, na realidade, eu sou. Eu trabalho aqui, como você sabe, no oeste baiano, ligado a desses casos que foram agora abordados, aqui no município de Cotegipe.
So Martin says that he's in West Bahia, he works with an institution there, and he wants to know more about a case that we talked about right now here.
Na realidade, nem é que eu quero saber mais, mas eu quero chamar a atenção por uma dimensão que ainda pouco foi abordada.
He wants to highlight one dimension of a case that we didn't talk a lot about it, rather than know more about such a case.
O engajamento desse Harvard Management Fund foi muito promovido, muito apoiado por políticos muito fortes aqui da Bahia.
Você diz o que você disse, o engajamento do Harvard Management Company?
A Harvard, os investimentos, a atuação desse fundo recebeu muito apoio político, como você sabe, aqui na Bahia. Depois eu vou fazer a minha pergunta.
Tá, ok. Sorry. So Harvard Management Company and the investments of Harvard there in Bahia had a lot of support of politicians of the state of Bahia.
E uma das perguntas que sempre pairava aqui na nossa região, como a famosa Harvard University, com os fundos dela, pode fazer um negócio muito grande com uma pessoa que é conhecida como um grande land grabber aqui do Brasil.
So he asks how such university, so well-known university, was able to make business there in Brazil with a very big and notorious land grabber.
E certamente é só possível porque esse land grabber ele teve um apoio político muito sólido, que também aspirava ao fundo de arriscar de fazer esse negócio com ele. Então, aqui a minha pergunta. Se essa estratégia desses fundos de conquistar apoio político através de um lobbying muito bem feito, é comum que isso se note em todos os casos que aqui se investigam, se isso faz parte desses negócios tão duvidosos. Essa dimensão política, que realmente aqui na Bahia foi muito notória, até hoje é.
So Martin asks, he says for asking that it's very strange for such a university, for such an institution to go ahead with various dangerous sort of business. And he concludes that for them to be able to do that, there must have been support from politicians for the land grabber and for the institution. And he asks if we could help him to understand about lobbies that the institutions can do with politicians for them to have security to conclude such sort of business. And also he says that it's everywhere, not only there, so it's a sort of pattern, he would say. Yeah.
Obrigado, thank you.
Está satisfeito? Sim,
Tô.
obrigado, Martin. Thank you
Obrigado.
very much for your question. So we have 3 questions. I think we can try to answer them. And then we can have another round. So I can try to answer some of them, and if the others are also can help, feel free to do that. So Rona's question, which was the status of the land before being land grabbed? Yeah. So in Brazil, we have a land law from the middle of the 19th century, 1850, that creates the status of farmland as a commodity. Yeah? It has to do with a path to abolition of enslavement and how to forbid anyone to access the land. Yeah? So it defines that farmland that was not a private property until then was part of the state. So all the land is, we call it terra devoluta, is federal land for the state. This laws changed a little bit all over the years. Not the case to get into that right now, but for you to understand, the state shall somehow sell this land to to privates for this land to be able to circulate as a merchandise or as a commodity in the land market. So, and the state can't do that easily. There are several regulations and several discussions about the constitution and if it's possible or not. There are several state laws that try to regulate that, and then they can be reverted after all. So it's a mess, actually. So what entrepreneurs do, and it's illegal, of course, they go there and they falsify a land title and they steal the land from the state. That's the pattern. Yeah? So, and Constitution establishes that communities, peasants, Afro-descendants, indigenous communities, they have the priority of all the state land for their use. They have tenure rights for this land that are not private. So law, if followed, would determine that the state should give this land to the communities and to their use for them, yeah, for their tenure rights. Yeah? But that's not what happens, of course. Yeah? So the pattern is historically in Brazil. It's how farmland constitution formation happens in Brazil since the 19th century. The pattern, is to grab it illegally and sell it. So it's illegal. It includes violence, threats, thefts, because the entrepreneur needs to displace the communities that use that land, split them from the land, and deforest it and try to sell it. That's the point here, and that's what we are trying to show, that keeps occurring there in the northeast of Brazil, but in many other places too. So how could an enterprise check if that farm is able to be bought and so on? It's not so difficult actually, because what anyone could do is go into the notary office and ask for the history of the land title of that farm. And if you go to the beginning of this history, and as we say, there is no detachment from the state, so this farm much probably has been illegally grabbed. That's the point. Yeah. So that's why we are in many moments here saying that TIAA and Harvard, through their shell companies, they bought land and farmland from the same land grabber, and they did not check actually this history of land titles for that specific farm. Yeah. And so the chance that it was illegally grabbed was enormous. It was huge, actually. Because of this issue with farmland in Brazil, in many areas, we have more than one land title for the same area, actually. Yeah? We have different levels. We have 5 landlords telling it's my land, or saying it's my land, and fighting against each other also at the same time, killing themselves also at the same time because of farmland. Sorry, Doug.
No. I agreeing with what you're saying, but I do want to speak to it as well, but finish.
Okay. So yeah, the enterprise should at least check it, as we do. Yeah, we ask for the. It's not easy because the notary offices are involved in this process of illegit documents. Yeah, they are part of it. They charge for that. There is a scheme to do that. In Bahia, for example, where Martin is, there is a huge operation of federal police against it's called Far West operation, and it involved judges that were selling sentences for entrepreneurs that were illegally grabbing land there, for example. It's a scandal, very recent thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about those questions, and then I try to ask Martin? Martin, sorry.
Oh yeah, I don't need to speak to the specific cases you're speaking of, but in general, the question about what companies are doing. Although just be clear. I saw I spent a lot of time working on land rights in Bolivia, and it was the same thing. You can have multiple titles from legal documents saying claiming to own the same piece of land because how bad the land records were a couple of decades ago, and now they're trying to straighten it out. But it's the same situation with TIA. Well, first of all, you mentioned Bungie. The traders like this, as far as I know, are not buying land. It really is the farm operators, and then pension funds and endowments are wanting. They see this as an attractive way, and so they're the ones coming in. And so TIAA did not check, the records all the way back, and quite obviously. And then when they got caught with this in 2015, they initiated a due diligence policy, and they deliberately structured it so they would only go back so far so that the falsified records would not, the falsified records exist back a couple of decades. And so deliberately structured it so that they weren't looking all the way back to when the land left state ownership into these private hands. And in terms of, when we use the term, I just want to point out when we use the term land grabbing, we use that in activism and advocacy, but it's also been talked to a lot of my scholars in journals like the Journal of Peasant Studies and stuff. What we mean by this, and it's a term used to I would say stigmatize the concentration of the new colonial processes of taking over land. And so when we say illegal land grab, we're talking about clear violation of the law, but the term is used a lot to mean the capital processes by which there's increasing concentration. And so we don't always mean that it's technically illegal, but in this case it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm highlighting that they are illegal because it's not always the case. Yeah. Does anyone else would like to add something? Teresa would like to add something? So it's difficult to answer to Martin's question, yeah, because he made several assessments, yeah, and I agree with him. It's a question, yeah, how it was possible. It's this farm, it's called Caracol, it's the last one that Teresa talked about. It's not here in our report because it's in Bahia, and the case we bring here is about South Piauí, but Bahia is like to the south, right here, yeah. And it's a huge farm. He knows how many thousands of hectares we have in this farm. I don't know if it isn't more than 100,000 of hectares in this farm. And it's blocked and it keeps being deforested. Of course, what's more than illegal because deforestation was already illegal. But it's important for us to ask how is it possible for such a preeminent institution to invest in such farm, very problematic, to say at least. But he asks if there is a lot of lobby, political lobby, for them to accomplish that. And I don't have information about it actually, but of course I was talking about Far West operation, and in Bahia we know that there is the involvement, the entanglement between judges, notary offices, entrepreneurs, politicians. Yeah, it was a scandal there, very close to the farm we are talking about. Yeah, so I would agree with you, Martin. But I don't have further information about that. Doug, Jeff, please.
You want to speak?
Sure, I'll just make one point, which is that, I mean, for the way investment law works in the US, the legal responsibility of the investors, fiduciary responsibility, which is simply to maximize risk-adjusted returns, which means Harvard Endowment Company's responsibility is to make as much money as possible. And that's not just that's their legal responsibility under the legal regime. They have to do that. And that's where the term risk adjusted comes in. And some of the advocacy we're doing is to show that there is actually financial, reputational, and operational, all kinds of risk to what they're doing. But it's not, I think, I mean, morally speaking, what they're doing presents huge moral hazard and it's wrong. But legally speaking, they're following the letter of the law by finding that farmland is, as Mark Twain said, buy land, they're not making any more of it. It's always going to be a really good, responsible investment from a financial perspective. And that's part of the problem here is we need to change the legal structures that incentivize land grabbing at the top and at the bottom.
Yeah, I guess I'm tempted to speculate a little bit about Martin's question. And that is, they hold these big land investor conferences in New York City, right? And that's where TIA is the keynote speaker because they're the lead organization having most responsibility in that. The Harvard Management Company is there. And this guy, Colin Butterfield, who, was involved with them both, would have been in those sorts of spaces, that's when these, decisions get talked about, right? And Colin Butterfield also has political ties. He's written a book about the movement to throw out Dilma Rousseff. And so he's got political ties in Brazil. And, we know that there's, right now, we're actually working with the National Family Farm Coalition here in the US, and this applies in the US farmland. But Senator Cory Booker has proposed legislation that would stop TIA and Harvard from doing this here in the United States. Not, any companies like that from doing this here in the United States. And we know that they have TIA has political lobbyists in Washington, right? So yeah, there's a lot of politics behind all of this. And a lot of, it's interpersonal relations.
Yeah. And I might share just one more thing, an anecdote that I like to share on some of these points. I once met at an investment conference. I met the person in charge of TIA's land purchases, and he knew about our campaigns, and we talked over drinks at this investment conference in Paris, and he could not understand our concerns because he said, this is the quote, "That's capitalism. There's winners and losers." So take that home with you, and so that's what we're up against, right? Is Harvard's the winner, and the people in the Cerrado are the losers, and that's what we're trying to challenge with our advocacy. Is we're not okay with that.
So Sydney, Trina. Hey Trina, nice to meet you. Who else? What's her name? Thiago. So there are other questions
There's one that came in.
online, so okay, I can read it after all.
Should I go first? Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay, I have to, it's actually two quick questions. One is, whether Fabio, you can explain to us, how these investments, what the strategies they use to get around the Brazilian legal limitations for land ownership by foreign nationals of foreign companies, because this is also something that I think is involved in this, ways of going around national laws so that you can do things that are actually illegal through this subsidiary. So how do they do this? Another thing is, I'd like you to speak a little bit as a researcher. Why is it so difficult to determine, just for us to understand, why is it so difficult to determine, for example, the degree to which Harvard continues to be involved and have business in farmland in this region of Brazil? For example, why is it so difficult to determine whether Harvard still owns Caracol or not? Just for us to understand the challenges and also what we can ask from, for example, the Harvard company in the name of transparency, so that the answer they give, to what extent we can believe in it, or whether they are or may use these strategies as ways of continuing to invest without allowing the people who are seeking transparency to find out really how involved they are.
Thank you, Sydney. Please, Trina.
Thank you. Thank you for all the presentations. Hi, my name is Trina Jackson, and I work for Gravity International with honor. Really great to be part of this campaign. I have just a quick reflection and then a question. My quick reflection is really echo what point that Jeff are also making about some of the ideology and the assumptions around these investments in land, because I've come to understand it as another form of settler colonialism. And this assumption that people can just be removed from their land. They're just and who continues to be on the front lines. Indigenous people, people in rural areas, poor people, Afro descendants. It's really kind of the same, it just kind of repeats itself. So this is a very replicable system that just keeps repeating itself in different forms. And so that's one way that I've come to understand this. I actually help put it in a very clear political analysis. Capitalism for sure, and also assumptions about Native people, indigenous people, and people who are expendable. So I guess my kind of related question is that a lot of TIAA's investments are tied up in nonprofit environments. And what would it mean for us to really be organizing within the nonprofit sector? That definitely includes universities and all of their research institutions are also nonprofits, but nonprofits like, the kind that I've worked for my entire professional life, social justice nonprofits, social service nonprofits that we donate and we give our money to. Many of their retirements are tied up with TIAA. And so what would it mean for us to organize within that sector? And maybe this is a question directed at Jeff and Doug about that. Also about, for Harvard, but what would it mean? Because that really implicates many of us. Me, definitely, because my entire professional career has been in nonprofit. And this is the first time in the last 3 years that I've understood that my retirement is also connected to the theft of land.
Thank you, Teresa and Thiago.
Thank you so much for this. I feel much more educated on this topic. I've read about this more story over the last couple of years. My question is basically, how can you deliver your message to TIA and Harvard in a language that they understand, right? Because this is, we're doing a capitalism, you mentioned meeting with one of these investors and speaking different languages. Is there an effort or an attempt to present them with viable alternatives where they can get the returns that they desire from the graph that you showed? It seems like there are very few investment opportunities that would give a 200% increase, but is there an effort to point them in the direction, hey, this is what you're doing wrong, here's what you could do that would be right and positive for local population society?
Okay, thank you, Thiago. Are you any question? And then we make another round of answers. Fabio? So Evelyn asks, sites, environmental and social impacts in livelihoods of local populations. There's data about precarious conditions of work in the production of the commodities in those lands, in those farmlands. And how does it happen? And that's about signs of situations similar to enslavement in those productions. So I will begin answering to Sydney's questions, then other ones I think that Jeff, Doug, Hannah can help. And I can try to answer Evelyn Nogueira's last one. So, Professor, thank you, Giovanna. Bye-bye. Thank you for your help. Thank you very much. So, Giovanna Soto had to leave us. So, Sidney, your first question, about subsidiaries, shell companies, and how they get around laws that limit foreign acquisition of farmland in Brazil. Actually, a very important question because we kept talking a lot about land grabbing, illegal land grabbing in the region. And those investments, they are also illegal due to foreign limits of acquisition of farmland in Brazil. Yeah. And it also has to do with financial capital, actually, I would say. The law is not able to grasp, law is somehow old, and it's very difficult for the law to grasp the difference between the landlord of the land and what financial capital would call investors. So, of course, that's what Radar is trying to do regarding investigation that INCRA, the Agrarian Reform and Colonization Institute in Brazil, they claim they don't own the land. TIA claims that doesn't own the land because they are only investing in the land, for example. Yeah. So we don't have nothing to do with that. We are not responsible for that. We are investors. And the owner is COSA, our partner on the ground. And of course, it's a lie. It's crystal clear. It's a lie. And also because TIAA bought from COSA almost all the Radar shares in 2016. COSA kept only 3% of Radar shares in Brazil. And TIA 97% of Radar in Brazil. And they kept claiming we are only investors. So, of course, now COSA bought it back. They keep doing that, and between themselves, Radar, SLC, it's a way for them to keep the prices high and the assets very well evaluated, also in stock markets. That's a mechanism to do that. So they are, of course, they are much beyond the limits of foreign acquisition of farmland. That's the point. But how justice will, or if we found them guilty or not, it's another matter here. But the shell companies, they help a lot them to get around the laws. Yeah, they say at the same time they can evade taxes if they have like 10, 15 companies. That's how Radar works. They have many companies, so they don't pay the taxes, and they say it's not us, it's that or that or that one. Special purpose vehicle, as they call it. Yeah? And with Harvard too, it's all about shell companies. For example, you get the case of that farm in West Bahia, because in Solo, in Piauí, they sold, because we followed that in Brazil, and we saw the entrepreneur that bought it, and but from Harvard reports and so on, it's impossible to know if they sold the enterprises or not. There is nothing about that. At the same time, what they did was, after all the pressure everyone did, they created an outsourced enterprise, Solon Capital, and now their natural resource fund went into Solon Capital. How did they do that? We don't know exactly. There is no transparency there. There is total lack of transparency. So we don't know how it worked, if they paid something, if Solon paid something. The CEO is the same one that was inside Harvard Natural Resource Fund. He became the CEO of Solon Capital. And as I understand, as our investigations understand it, very difficult. There are no documents or reports about that. The assets went into Solon. And if Solon sold them or not, it's impossible to know. Also because Solon is a private equity firm, so it doesn't have to report anything. If it was a public enterprise, they should have reports about their businesses. But Solon doesn't have to. So we don't know if they sold the enterprises or not. As soon as we know, they keep the enterprises, because was theirs, or they were theirs, and we don't know if they sold them. We don't know. We know about Solon. We don't know about the others. GVE, Terracol, Caracol. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of hectares of farmland in that region we are showing you. So we can say, yeah, okay, they sold that because they are telling us they sold. Don't know. Actually, that's the point. So there is total lack of transparency, and we can check or trace it or track it. And of course, the same for TIAA. When we are launching, releasing the report online, TIAA said, we sold our farm in Piauí in July. Your report doesn't show that. It's not about that, yeah. And if you sold it, you profited over that destruction and violence. And so, yeah, hope that I was able to help. There would be much more to talk about. Jeff, Doug?
Sure.
Do you want to answer Trina and Thiago?
And in fact, I mean, that's our core argument to TIA is that you buy land in order, you buy it low and sell it high. And that's the problem. That's the speculation here.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting that they say, no, we sold that. And you say, well, yeah, that's what we're saying is you buy the land and then you sell it at a profit. Okay. Is this something very good? I just wanted to, let's see, quickly to address Trina's, serious point. One thing that I've learned along the way in this work is, I mean, we're here hosted by the history department, and it's interesting to look at the history. I don't know this in depth, and I think we as a campaign should do some more work to surface this, but that pension funds were originated by social movements and labor movements as mutual aid societies to protect their own long-term interests. And TIA itself comes out of that history, actually, and sometimes they refer back to that. But they were, mutual aid projects by immigrant worker communities who understood that the pathway to security was to generate intergenerational wealth. And if you're not going to simply inherit that wealth because you come from privilege, the only way to do that is to collectivize your wealth and then put it into investments that you can, that can pay out into the future. So that's the origin of the whole retirement fund, pension fund idea. But over the course of the 20th century, like everything else, they were privatized and financialized and turned into, wealth creation machines. And now it's sort of just recognized as part of financial capital that, some people get a pension fund and other people don't. That's just the way it is. And so there's a lot of deep history there that I think, we could and should do a better job of unpacking. And that, to another point related to that, there is simply no way to generate 10 or 13 or 20% returns on investment without exploiting human labor and the earth. So the question, it always does come back to this question of what can TIA do differently and still provide, retirement funds. It can't be done. And that's why as a broader, narratives of our movement, we need degrowth. We need to degrow the economy and we need to spread the wealth. And I think it's so, but to the point of how do we organize, I think Doug can maybe speak, there has been, and I would love maybe Gustavo to add to this as well in terms of what we need to see in academia organizing.
Yeah, thanks Trina for your question. Like as you said, there's lots of nonprofits that have TIA plans. My wife works in a little Montessori school. TIA retirement plan. But I think, and there might be a way to do that. I'm not sure how to reach all the little nonprofits, but I do know that the universities are very clearly identified. We can clearly identify who and figure out how to reach those employees. And we can use academic professional organizations to reach across universities in one to the other. And within university, we can reach across this. You know, we've had a lot of solidarity in anthropology and geography over this, because some of us who started it have our roots in that. You know, but we need to, you know, we need to reach out further. There's lots of people in the academic community. I mean, everyone is horrified. No one thinks it's. It appears only, you know, TIA has its major subsidiary, Nuveen, manages all of its assets. And Nuveen Natural Capital is the company which actually manages the shell companies. Nuveen Natural Capital is the land buyer. And you know, the executives within those divisions are clearly committed to the strategy. But to be honest, and they're the leader. They're the leader in the strategy. But 10 or $15 billion in direct land acquisition has a huge impact on the ground. But it's still a tiny part of TIA's overall $1.2 trillion portfolio, right? Now, a lot of the other ways they're making money are just as bad. But I haven't tried to wrap. We're already working on fossils. Right? We are working to get into the best fossils. And there's other things that need to divest from. But this land thing, they're committed to it because they're really greenwashing with it and trying to, and we can defeat that because it's bullshit. And then if it gets exposed enough, this becomes a liability to them more than this is actually worth. They're making a lot of money in it, yes, but this investment is still a small enough part of their portfolio that they don't need to be doing this, even in the short term. In the long term, Jeff raised the good questions of how we tackle that. I would say also TIA has really perverted the origins of this by turning it into a company which is controlled by a very small board of governors with 2 boards of trustees under them. And there's no democratic participation, not even like shareholder participation. It's very tight control from the top. CEO makes 18 million last year. That's roughly the annual comp. And this is a nonprofit representing, and the CEO is making 18 million. Anyway, I'll stop my rant there. But there's a lot unanswered, right, in these questions. But that'll be my attempt for now.
Anna, would you like to add something?
I think just in response to your reflection and question, this is a place where collective action is really important, because any one person changing where they're investing their money, TIAA doesn't really care, even though it really matters to us. And so one thing that's really powerful about a TIAA in particular, I think, is that it is so many nonprofits and unions and universities and places in which people are already organized. There isn't like an organization that's like, I'm a TIAA investor, but there are like, I'm on staff at this university, or I'm part of this network of nonprofits, or I'm part of this union. And so I think that's, as far as I know, there hasn't been like a really collective strategy around that outside of universities. And I think TIAA Divest has done amazing work looking at like what happens when you actually organize faculty across universities. And so it's interesting to imagine what that could look like down the road.
One thing that we've found, at least my perspective on the efforts that we've made over the years to build the TIA campaign, is that it really needs to be led by, academic faculty. It needs to be led by the participants. And, as NGOs, we can throw a bunch of ideas out there and do campaigning and put out documentation, but organizing is a whole other thing. And that's where there's a great wave of faculty senate resolutions being passed to tell universities, to tell TIA to get out of fossil fuels and agribusiness and land grabs. It's been a great technique, and Gustavo was sharing with me earlier we did try to do some organizing on the American Anthropology Association and the Association of Geographers, but they have, well, why don't you share a little bit, Gustavo, about your thoughts on?
Sure. So, for those who don't know, I'm Gustavo Oliveira, I'm a professor of geography at Clark University. And I do research on Chinese investments and agribusiness and related issues of land grab. So, the idea was to get not just individual faculty senates to pressure their own individual university to say, hey, why don't we tell TIA we don't want to do this deal anymore, look for alternatives, or ask TIA to make products that won't include fossil fuels or land grabbing. But to use these associations that are where like geographers from all universities gather every year, or anthropologists from all universities gather every year, as a kind of springboard to spread this information. Not just, hey, this is happening, but also here are the steps that some folks have been taking that can be effective at advancing these causes. So, faculty, like institution-wide pressure could be stronger than just the individual ones. But because, the people who care about these things are, not every professor at every university is going to care about that. It's hard to do that. So the idea would be to use some of these associations as vehicles to energize the campaign. The challenge is that these associations themselves also have a lot of their own different politics that they're working with. And oftentimes it's difficult as a few faculty members, like we tried, a couple of years before, or a few organizers to get in there and get the kind of space that's needed. So, the conversation that I have been having with some of my colleagues, more senior colleagues that have experience organizing in these academic spaces, is that at least in the cases of the ones that I know, coming from this perspective of geography in particular, the president of the association plays a really big role in kind of setting the agenda for like what are the kind of political struggles that we're going to really prioritize. So we've had some really progressive presidents among the geographers recently that advanced struggles against harassment, especially with women, junior scholars, people of color, as well as reducing our climate footprint of our conferences, as well as working in solidarity with the workers and the staff where we hold our conferences. So an idea would be to try and see who might be people that would be positioning themselves for leadership in these negotiations and try to approach those folks to see if they can then take up, like a cause for calling for divestment from TIA or calling TIA to divest from these kinds of investments as the kind of banner of struggle. And if that is taken up at the level of association, we'll be able to maximize the kind of exposure, not just of this information, but also of the strategies that the faculty can use and take that to various different universities. So these are conversations that I'm having, but these are like middle-term, long-term things. And if I can add one thing that I think is interesting for me every time that I see your work, we get questions like Andrew's. Like if a company wants to invest in a particular place and not be involved in land grabbing, how can they do that? Or a question like Ron about, well, what was the time before? A lot of the question is about the land ownership. But really what we see, as Professor Chalup's question pointed out, is that, TIA is not buying land. There's such a complex set of companies in between that enables them to always, squiggle out of the way. And whether the land was illegally, grabbed, or whether it was illegally deforested, or whether it's illegally owned because it is foreign or not, it's almost besides the point, given the kind of, social and ecologically destructive practices that are going on. This could be completely illegal and yet still very problematic. So it seems that while the illegality of it is useful to galvanize, people to mobilize, we have the potential to talk about and organize around the social ecological destruction on its own terms. And if it's illegal, all the worse, because then we can talk about, well, we need better laws. Our laws are not doing what we'd expect them to do. And on the other hand, that, we're not going to be able to, I think, stop this at the point of the land acquisition. What we see is that there's a need for control of capital flows, control of corporate structures, control of the kind of mergers and acquisitions and the lack of transparency that enables this to go on. So there's like so many layers to this, which is what makes it so difficult. You know, it's not just to say, okay, this institution should stop in that particular illegal activity. You know, like it's so messy, and that's why it's so hard to get this campaign to get going. Sorry, I wasn't a panelist. I invited you to speak.
I wanted to add one thing to Gustavo. We did pass an advisory resolution in the American Water Association, and then a rather watered down version that didn't actually mention TIA, just talked about. Or I don't know. So a watered down version was then passed by the executive board. And so we generated momentum. There is, you know, there's powerful amount of interest there. And it's just a matter of pushing it through, and keeping at it. Part of the problem is we haven't built a big enough movement yet to be able to push in all these different directions. But we're almost there. We're very close.
So I would like to answer to Evelyn Nogueira's last question and finish. He asks about conditions of work in the production of commodities, and they are really, really terrible. Yeah, these productions are very much mechanized, so there is the expulsion of positions with the increase in productivity for all the commodities productions. Yeah, for example, in Brazilian sugar cane production, we had in the first decade of 21st century several cases of deaths due to excess of work cutting manually sugar cane because of mechanization. And the workers were competing against the machines. But we have also conditions similar to enslavement over the pilots of the machines. So it's not only about manual work, but it's about the necessity of the members of the communities who are displaced to have to sell themselves as workforce, as a commodity too, and there's no job for them due to how capitalism is nowadays. And unemployment is structural to capitalism nowadays. So capitalists can decline the conditions of work, and people have to sell themselves in the conditions they find in the market. That's the point. Yeah. So what's a tragedy there, for example, in South Piauí, is that many teenagers or young men, after their families are displaced, they go and work in those enterprises, actually, in those conditions. That's very brave, and it's really a tragedy because it's expected. Yeah. So it's a very deep consequence of this process we are describing to you here. I think that's it. I don't know if there are any other questions on the chat, but we advanced a little bit over the time, and I would say we could finish our panel, our launch. Thank you very much for the ones left here. Thank you.